Hi everyone, welcome to this next edition of the Good Bloke, Not Woke podcast. It's my pleasure today to have an incredible conversation with Claire Davis. Now, Claire and I met actually on LinkedIn. I just saw one of her posts and I just thought, wow, this lady's doing stuff a little bit differently and she's pretty courageous to talk about the things she's talking about. So I just reached out and I said, do you want to do a podcast? And I told her what I was about and she just couldn't wait. So here we are recording this podcast. So a little bit about Claire, I'm going to read off my screen here. She's one half of the husband and wife team behind the multi-award-winning wellness brand 38 Degrees North, which was founded 12 years ago in Ibiza. So they're in London, okay? So I didn't know of their business, but obviously they're doing great work. Claire's also the co-founder of the Midlife Mentors, whose mission is to promote a no-nonsense, anti-fad approach to the health and happiness of over 40. She cuts through the noise and fake promises and provides a balanced, evidence-based strategies that empower people to live extraordinary lives. Alongside her podcast called The Midlife Mentors, which is now in the top 1.5% of global charts, Claire is also the co-author of a best-selling book, a public speaker, and regularly features in the national press, such as the Daily Telegraph, the Sunday Times, Stylist, and the New York Times. The Midlife Mentors corporate programs, workshops, and retreats leverage Claire's experience in NLP, hypnotherapy, stress management, personal training, nutrition, gut health, and life and business coaching. Claire is also a hormone specialist and a certified menopause practitioner. So a lot of experience there, a lot of skills, and obviously a lot of courage. And so I'm really looking forward to this conversation today with Claire Davis. So, Claire Davis, welcome to the Good Bloke, Not Woke podcast, where we explore healthy and confident masculinity from many different perspectives. So how are you doing today?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, fantastic. So I'm going to let our listeners know that Claire and I connected because she put a stunning post up on LinkedIn. It was really courageous, and she was talking about how she's noticing in workplace how a lot of women have been really, really rough on men. And all the talk in the world is about men doing unkind things or brutal things sometimes to women, but nobody's talking about what women are doing to men, especially when women gang up on men, yeah. And I'm really interested to explore that with you and then explore your background and all your work and what you're doing. I think it's extraordinary. So looking forward to this.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's what I was saying before we jumped on the recording, that actually it's one of the beautiful things. Like, there's a lot to be said that's damaging about social media, but connecting with like-minded souls is a real positive. So thanks for reaching out and having me on.
Oh, no, absolute pleasure. And it is. It's you're right. I mean, it can be a real gossip platform
Mm.
where people can get really, really attacked, and we see it can be the source of suicide in young kids as well, you know?
Yeah, totally. I actually did a post just earlier on LinkedIn about the fact that I I don't want to subscribe, and I don't subscribe to that attacking on social media. I just find that if we can't have decent conversations on social media with each other, then we shouldn't be having them at all.
Yeah.
Everyone has their different opinions, and we should be respectful of those. And no, there's nothing to be gained from going back and forth with someone that just wants to argue with you.
Yeah. What do they say? If you argue with a fool, who's the bigger fool?
Exactly, exactly. But we were also saying before we jumped on, it's about that peace and that self-control and controlling what you can control, and that's our reaction to things. We
Yeah.
can control our reaction to things, and if we're getting triggered all the time by other people and other people's opinions, I think that's quite a reflection on us, and we probably need to go away and have a good look in the mirror.
Yeah, exactly. And so that whole situation in workplaces, have you noticed anybody else talking about it? Perhaps even if you give us a bit of a rundown for our listeners, what you were really referring to in the post. I mean, it was a powerful post and it got a lot of attention.
Thank you. Yeah, I wasn't expecting that. It's funny, isn't it? You don't know whether it's just going to be tumbleweed, but it wasn't. It's obviously hit a note with men and women, which is really nice. I mean, there were some negative comments on there, but again, I just don't bother with those. Overall, it's been really nice to understand other people's viewpoints. And
Hmm.
again, that's the beauty of social media. I want to know what other people have to say about this and what other people's experiences are. But what led me to do that was primarily really just what I see on social media anyway. I
Yeah,
see a lot of man bashing, is what I would say, massive generalizations. All men are this, all men are that, massive shaming, belittling, judging. And that really hurts me. I have to say,
yeah,
I'm a quite a sensitive soul. That really hurts me because I've had experiences of bad men, in quotes. I have. I've had
yeah.
experiences of good men, my husband being one of them. But equally, there are good women. There are women that do good things and there are women that do bad things. I don't understand just from that observer perspective of social media in general why we are tarring all men with the same brush because it's completely unfair. And then from my other experience would be I do go into organizations, I do witness it. You know, I'm a corporate well-being consultant. I see it in the workplace, and not that I'm necessarily at the moment able to necessarily voice that. I try to, but I don't. I have to be a little bit careful. You have to balance it slightly. But from a personal perspective as well, I've seen my husband, James. He's written a fantastic book. It's been published. It's called a Man's Guide to Midlife, How to Thrive Through Andropause. And we are both menopause practitioners. So we're going to organizations to talk about the menopause, James too. And that's all very welcome. Organizations are totally on board. We're talking about the menopause. As soon as you talk actually about men's health at midlife and the fact that testosterone, low testosterone, does lead to many symptoms, does lead to lots of physical, mental, and emotional difficulties and challenges, they don't really want to hear about it. Some organizations do, but he's written a book and it's just incredible. It's very science backed and then it's very practical, giving men lots of tips and help about how to modify lifestyle factors to really start optimizing their well-being. Some organizations are really open to that, some aren't. There's a bit of pushback. But more than that, it's the pushback that I've seen from female journalists in the
Mm.
media. Now, over here, I'm sure it's the same over there. Here in the UK, it's a very female-led industry. There's
Yeah.
a lot of women. And here's the thing, I'll go back to this in a minute. A lot of HR professionals in the UK are women. It's
Mm.
a predominantly women-based career. Same with journalists. And so I've seen James work really hard with a really good heart to try and help get this message out there that men, you are not alone at midlife. You are going through these pressures, these changes. You're not making it up. It's a real thing. Suicide cohort is the highest in midlife men, almost 5 times more than women of all ages. There is a link to low testosterone and suicide. And women in the media are just like, no, don't hijack. This is some of the things I said in the post. Don't hijack our hormone story. That's one of the responses he had back. Haven't had men had it good enough for so long? Why do we have to talk about them? It's our turn. And actually, it's just embarrassing that a man is even talking about having a midlife crisis. But it's okay for us to do loads of press on women at midlife going through the menopause, having affairs, ending marriages, going traveling around the world, starting a side hustle. It's okay for us. That's empowerment. But when we talk about men doing it, it's a completely double standard. So I've really just ranted on there quite a lot, but that's what I see going into corporates and how there's a little bit of not, I've never even heard of the andropause. I just don't think it's going to fly. What would the women say about us going and talking about andropause? And then the pushback that we see from female journalists as well.
It's so interesting. So I'd love to sort of dig into that one a little bit, and maybe we can't answer my questions. But when people in the media do that, what do you think it is? Do you think it's just personal bias, or is there, like as we know, for a long, long time, the legacy media has been very corporate, and some people believe there's some sort of conspiracy theory that they're combined with some sort of political leaning, whereas another really good viewpoint that I got was that it's just very corporate and people want to fit in. They don't want to be outside in their workplace, and they want to do the things that get them good feedback and good promotion. And obviously, women's, menopause, premenopause, perimenopause, all those stages have become a huge marketplace. And there's a lot of advertising that puts a lot of money into the media. So do you feel like those female journalists are just being obnoxious human beings, or do you feel like they're really trying to keep steering the narrative in the area where there is just a huge marketplace?
I think both. I think both. I can imagine both. You're quite right. There are so many products, there are so many brands now that are all focused on the menopause. And there's a lot of money in it. Here in the UK, there's a lot of money in the menopause now, to the point where I'll be completely honest, because I am. I just, I've been banging on about the menopause. I've been menopause trained now for 4.5, 5 years, and I've just seen so much crap come to the market that actually it's almost put me off putting myself in that bundle of people that talk about it, because it's so many people have just jumped on the bandwagon, and actually the advice they're giving is not healthy, and it's just another thing. It's just another commercial thing that they're talking about. But I think women journalists, I think it's about the clickbait, right? It's about the validation of them getting the good stories. It's about making sure that their boss sees them writing about stuff that's relevant, that isn't going to have too much of a kickback. We want to be controversial, but we don't want to be too controversial. We want to speak for the majority. And that's what it is. The women's voices are louder at the moment. That's what I see. They are louder. So they want to speak for the majority. They don't want the kickback, and they want to spin it. As I said to you before we started recording, they want to spin it that it's, even if they do put a men's story out there, they still kind of want to put a nuance on it that it's a man's fault, or there's something that the man did wrong, and he didn't take responsibility for this happening in his life, and this, as James has experienced. So I think it's both. I think I would argue that they are probably wounded themselves, that they've just got caught up in the whole narrative around patriarchy, and they're just wanting to continue that and be the big guns out there.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's like if you've got perhaps an overwhelming sort of urge or drive in your consciousness, and you're lucky enough to find a career where you can really live it out. I remember once I had to go and do a seminar on health to an organisation that was involved in domestic violence. So it's an agency, and
Wow.
I walked into the room to present, and there was 40 women in there, and they were sitting there with their arms folded, glaring at me. And I thought, wow, this is a really cool career for women who have got a problem with men. And I won them over in the end, which was fine. But I like that sort of thing as a challenge. But I'm wondering whether in that journalism space as well, where it actually is a collection point for women who haven't, as you said, they've got wounds, they haven't healed their resistance to male figures. Maybe that's it too. But what's really sad is that the things they're not writing about, because at the Global Wellness Summit in Tel Aviv in 2022, and then again at the Global Wellness Summit in Miami in 2023, two really, really smart, clever female physicians who are specializing in the women's health area and doing amazing work, revealed that only 3% of all of the pharmaceutical drugs that are specifically for women are ever tested on women. 3%. And they're not even tested on female rats. And you know why? Because the researchers don't want those crazy fucking hormones interfering with the results of their studies.
It's nuts, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is. And they stood out and said that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you bet. And it's true. I've followed up since and done the homework, and it's a real
Yeah.
phenomena. And somebody needs to throw that bit of meat to those journalists.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because it feels like there's not a service being done. But
Well,
so
you say that, like, sorry to interrupt you there, John.
no,
Like,
you good.
one of the things here again, that I just find you're talking about the health care service there. We have the NHS. Us women, I've just had my letter come through the door. Claire, it's time for your next smear. It's your next smear test. Do men get, hey, James, my husband, hey, you need to go for a prostate check? Do they get that? No. And again, this is another, no one speaks of that. Men don't put their head up above the parapet and say, hang on a minute, if women are getting this kind of care, then why aren't men? Which prostate, I do believe, I might be completely wrong, but I think it's one of the biggest killers for men. It's right up there. Like, so why does a man have to, which is very rare for a man, to put his hand up and say, can I come and get my prostate checked, please? Because men just bimble along with their head in the sand generally because they don't want to make a fuss and they don't necessarily want to go and see their healthcare professional. It's not on their radar. And yet, again, this from a healthcare perspective, there's not balance there.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. But again, I believe that it's market driven. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, here in Australia, everybody gets a bowel screening kit in the post,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
you have to take your own stool
Yes.
sample and
Yeah.
post it in. And whereas I personally believe that's a great scam. Why don't we just send people really clear instructions about how to keep their bowels very clean, how to
Yeah.
which fermented foods are really good to eat, why it's
Yeah.
important to hydrate yourself, to
Mm-hmm.
keep water flowing through, to keep everything soft in the bowel so
Yeah.
it moves through, and
Fiber.
yeah, and so we don't have this, like, bowel cancer should be the easiest cancer in the world to eliminate.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also believe that we're not really revealing what the causes of prostate cancer are. I mean, I've
Mm-hmm.
never ever had a test, and I don't intend to. I'm that
Mm-hmm.
confident in my ability to manage myself that
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I won't. But that doesn't mean other men shouldn't be tested. But I think that this the thing I learned about men, and um, it's such a really cool thing. Men are very different to women, and we need to honor that. And the thing
Yes.
about men is they tend to be very practical. And
Mm-hmm.
so what they want to know is, how does it work? Why
Mm-hmm.
does it break? What do you need to do to prevent it from breaking? And what do you need to do if it breaks? Right? Now, they've got that same attitude towards their health.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is, if they go to a GP, the GP's got 7 minutes and
Yeah.
has not got time to give them all that information to educate them so that they understand.
Yeah.
And so most men do not like being told what to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
GP visit is all about being told what to do.
Yeah.
And they might likely to walk out and go, well, fuck you, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
I couldn't be bothered. I don't understand. But when you take men on a journey, like I do a lot of men's health seminars, and I teach them actually how to do a saltwater preparation to do a
Mm-hmm.
bowel cleanse, and how to
Yes.
do it. And boy, I get some funny stories. And they never tell their wives they're doing it. They just do it
Yeah.
quietly in their own space, and
Yeah. Yeah. Not announcing it.
no.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, one gentleman, it was a real classic. He was so locked into it, he invited four of his mates to come to his place. Three of his mates, that's right. And he said, we're playing golf on Saturday morning and we're teeing off at 8 o'clock, so be here at 7:30. And when they arrived, he said, we're actually not teeing off until 10 o'clock, but here, drink this. And he had it all lined up. all these 2 litre jugs of salt water, and he made them
Mm.
all drink the water and have their bowel movements and all that sort of stuff. And he said, right, now we're going to play golf. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah. A bowel cleanse party.
it's right. Yeah.
I know, and I see that. I see that with my husband, and I think that's why I do love a little shameless plug for his book. But I really do because it's got the science bit at the background, like at the front, because he's science based. Again, like you said, he's very practical. So
Yeah.
James is just he doesn't want any fluff. He's
Uh,
just very practical, and then at the end, it's like this is what you can do, this is what you can do, this is how you can do it.
yeah.
And with that, and I think one of the things that I do see a lot, particularly with midlife men, that James talks about a lot is that sense of isolation as they get older. And I do think that this is what, a lot of organizations, I suppose, need to get on board with. And I don't have all the answers either. But
Uh,
they're experiencing high levels of stress. They're much less able, again, this isn't all men, because I don't want to be the one that tars people with the same brush, but a lot of men find it very difficult to even get in touch with their emotions. Like it's not even something they're capable of. It's not
mm,
something that's inherently built in them like us women. So they don't
yeah.
even know what they're experiencing. That's very confusing. They just know there's a malaise, a depression, um, a loss of zest for life. And then because they feel that way, it's almost they isolate themselves more as they get older. Their
Mm,
social networks, we know that their social networks start to reduce. Then they get to the age where they're thinking about retirement and their job has defined who they are. Like men take their self identity a lot more from their work and what they do rather than who they are, because they have
yeah.
never really had to tap into that so much.
Yeah.
And so then they retire, and we know the stats around retirement. Men do tend to die earlier than women. They lose their they lose their direction, and then they just go downhill. And so I would love to see organisations, I would love to see this paying more attention to that demographic at work. I really would, because it's when we can catch them at a point where we can make a real difference
Yeah.
bef before they get to that end point. So
Yeah. It's
yeah,
heartbreaking, isn't it? It
yeah.
really is the number of men who fall off the perch within a couple of years of retirement, you know?
Awful. It's awful. And it's not suicide necessarily. It's almost like heartbreak. That's how I
Hmm.
see it. It's like I've defined myself by this. We know when you don't have social connections and there's loneliness. Loneliness is actually one of the biggest killers. It's one of the precursors to earlier death. So when they're lonely, they're going to die earlier. They're going to get more illnesses, and they're not going to be able to mentally, also resilience wise, be able to cope with that. So that's why I feel so passionate about, listen, men are struggling with this anyway. What we don't why are women not standing shoulder to shoulder and supporting men? The feminist movement, as far as I see it, was never about squashing men down, belittling them, getting our own back. This what I said, payback. It
Yeah.
was never about that. It was about standing shoulder to shoulder and saying, I'm equal, I'm different. This is what a lot
Yeah.
of women forget as well. We're different. We
Yeah.
were born different. We were made different. Why can't we honor and accept those things? Why do we have to try to be like men? I don't want to be like a man. Sorry, I don't. Like I want to honor. I love being a woman. I love this. So why are we kind of getting this attitude of payback, which I don't believe original feminism was ever about. It was just
No.
about, can we have the vote, please? Can we
Yeah.
go into the workplace? Can we contribute?
What's really interesting, I was contemplating this because I tend to sort of go into that space to really explore these areas, and I wonder about them. And this surge. I've got a very good friend, Amanda Bleasing, who coaches women who want to move into the C-suite. And if we go back to London before even the stock exchange, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where people did their daily roles, there was no big corporations. It was just businesses, small to medium-sized businesses everywhere. And so there was no status really for many people associated with what they did in their work. But in the last 100 years, especially, and even really since television, all of a sudden, there is huge status connected with what people do with their work. And I wonder whether we've got people chasing equality or whether they're chasing status. Because
Mm-hmm.
positions give status. And I'm not saying
Mm-hmm.
that's a bad thing. I mean, I've had plenty of status in my life, like
Yeah.
we're all proud of our resumes, right? And we like to talk about them. But just this driver for what, and people keep talking about, oh, there's this percentage of women in executive roles and this percentage of men in executive roles. But yeah, that a lot of women took time out of the workplace to have kids, and you can't take that away from them. And most of them
Mm-hmm.
don't regret that. So there's this narrative about how bad it is and how out of balance it is because of the numbers. But you go back 200 years,
Mm-hmm.
women didn't even aspire to that, not because they
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to do the jobs, but there was no status associated
Mm-hmm.
with any of those
Mm-hmm.
things. And I think the same for men as well. So I'm just wondering where, I mean, I've just dumped this on you, but
No, I
where
love
you
it.
feel that might be sort of
Mm.
playing a role here, no?
And no, I love this conversation because now we're going deep, right? And I love this because, again, it's something that women aren't necessarily going to put their head above the parapet and say, just because we were told that we could have it all, does it mean we should?
Yeah, right.
Right. And that's what I see when I coach women that are top of their game, top of their tree. A lot of them feel like they've been betrayed or lied to. Like once I got to that, I've got my career, I had children later, I've had children, I'm highly stressed, I'm now having to go back into work, or I've been back in work for a while, I'm still climbing that ladder. And for what? I'm miss, I'm missing out on my children's best years. They're seeing mum uber stressed out, strung out, trying to balance it all. And actually, I had this conversation with a lady that came on our podcast the other day. She said that she's an amazing lady. She said that she did some focus groups with some very, very top level executives, female, and their teenage daughters.
Wow.
Yeah, and they were all like, the teenage daughters were asked, "Do you want to be like your mum? Do you want to have this?" And a majority of them said, I think there was about 40 of them, a majority of the teenage girls said, "Absolutely not. I don't want that. I've seen what it's done to my mum," and that's hard for the mums to hear. Some apparently were quite accepting of that, but it's very hard when they've spent all of those years building something for the thing that really only matters to that woman, which is their children. And
Yeah,
so to hear the daughter say, "Oh my goodness, I've looked at my mum and that's not necessarily something I want." And I'm like, well, that's actually a good thing. Because what happens it was around the 90s, right? So well, 80s and 90s, it was that time when us women were like, you can do anything you want. And it was amazing. I went into a career in the 90s. It was, you can do anything you want. And so if you look back, that's when we did do anything we want. And that look, if you look at my age group, I don't actually have children, but we didn't have children till later. And then we're trying to juggle it all. And we're like, hang on a minute, this isn't utopia that I was promised at all. But that was kind of a bit of a tangent about the question, because there's another part of the question that you asked, which is about status. And I think that across the board is a massive problem, because you said this too. It's men and women. We are chasing a dream and it's been accelerated massively since 2007, since the introduction of a smartphone and Facebook. We can now see everyone else's highlight reels. And they are highlight reels. It is not truth. It's a shop front.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at people's highlight reels that they want you to see that isn't realistic because we know anxiety, depression, all of that stuff is on the rise in everyone. So is suicide. And so we're comparing ourselves with complete unrealistic expectations, chasing, the young 25-year-old standing next to his Lamborghini. And you're like, it's so warped that we've lost our sense of peace, our sense of what really matters. That actually we get joy from the simple things.
Yeah.
Really, like we really do. And I went through this, John, because I had burnout 2 years ago. And I can speak to this very, very deeply because I was that woman.
Yeah. Wow.
I was that woman. I was the one that was chasing validation, money, success. Look at me, look at
Hmm.
my status. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me was my burnout, because it wasn't just physical, it was like an emotional and spiritual burnout. It was like an
Yeah.
emptiness. There was
Yeah.
nothing there. There's no solid ground to it at all.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm glad you got through it.
Oh, and I'm yeah, and actually rediscovering what it means to be successful,
It's
and that's so
interesting.
beautiful.
Yeah, it's so because I feel like, we disconnect, or we actually don't help kids find their sense of purpose. And I find it really fascinating talking to 16 and 17-year-olds.
Mm.
And whenever I'm in the supermarket, I'm going through the checkout, you've often got these 16, 17-year-old kids. And while they're checking my groceries, I'll say to them, "So is this your full-time gig or part-time?" And they go, "Oh no, part-time." And I say, "Are you studying?" "Yeah, I'm studying. "Oh wow, where are you at?" And they might be in their final years of school. And I say, "So what are you going to do after school?" And they go, "Oh, I'll probably go to university." And I go, "Hang on a minute. Do you know what you want to study?" "No, not really." "Well, why would you go to university? Why would you do that?" You know?
Yeah,
And I said,
yeah,
"Why would you create a hex debt for something that you might not want to do anymore?" And what I'm getting around to them is just work here if you like, save up your money, go and travel until one day you stumble
yes.
over what it is you really want to do, right?
Hmm.
Then you can, if you need to go to university, you can, right? And I did this with my son. That was the attitude I had to him. And one day he stumbled over what he wanted to do, and now he's gobsmackingly successful. And it's so interesting that when, in a pure life, and I know we're not all pure lives, but if you follow your inspiration and find out what you really want to do, and then you go after that, male or female, it doesn't matter. You
Yeah,
could end up being a corporate executive because you see this company, you love their product, and you've got this overwhelming feeling that
yeah,
if you could get into the leadership of that company, you could benefit society so incredibly by the
yeah,
direction that you would take it. Now, that's a purpose-driven mission. This is what I
yeah,
want to do. And you know what? You won't have a lot of negative stress from that
yes,
perspective. Yeah?
yes,
Because you're
yeah,
in there, and your daughters will be looking at you going, "Wow, my mum's amazing." And every time she comes in the space, they feel her, they feel how grounded she is and committed, and that's all inspiring.
it's amazing. And actually, I say when I coach people and have these conversations, what people don't realize is there's a lot of stress that is caused by not being on purpose.
Yeah,
There's like that not being in alignment with what your true nature is really meant to do here, in
yeah,
a way that only you can. Like I truly believe that we have these special gifts that are supposed to go out into the world, and it's that misalignment, the misalignment of values, of purpose, that create the most stress because we're kind of battling against this life that we're living or feel like we should lead, and there's this other part of ourselves going, no, come over here.
yeah,
But when we get to midlife, we become risk adverse, so it becomes even harder because we play, when we're younger, we play to win. when we get to midlife, we play not to lose. We play not to lose the things that have created the status, the material possessions, how people see me. So it becomes a lot harder at midlife to break that cycle. And that's what I
Yeah.
love helping people do, is kind of, I suppose, see things in a different way and realize that it's not just the skills that they've created in their job, but like the life skills as
Yeah.
well, and the perspective that they've got. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
you're so right about the teenagers. And I also, James and I, my husband, talk about this a lot. Unfortunately, again, with the rise of the internet, one of the negatives of that is I feel like it makes people, this again could be a generalization. I'm very aware that I might be making some generalizations here, but that they're surrounded by kind of like the internet influencer, the YouTuber, and all that kind of thing. And so rather
Mm.
than thinking necessarily outside the box of all these different things that I could do, it's what can I do on the internet? What can I do on the internet? And we're just creating another generation of, boggle-eyed children just sitting on their computers in their own little world, in their own little shell, being in the digital world rather than the human world.
It's so fascinating, isn't it? And it's there's a lot we can do in this space. I remember a few years ago meeting Therese Rain, and Therese is an amazing businesswoman. She was actually married to the Prime Minister of Australia, and she was very wealthy because she'd created an extraordinary business. And the market that she went into, and this was really driven by compassion. She had attention on people who had fallen out of the workforce because of debilitating injury and had been left sitting on benefits and weren't moving forward, and they were stuck in that space. And a lot of them, their lives were in disarray. And so she wanted to set up a service where she could bring these people in, reconnect them, find out what
Mm.
they needed, and find a way to bring them back to be a productive member of society, you know.
Mm.
And she had some great stories because she said she used to sit down with these people and ask them a question. And the question was, what's that thing that you do in your life that whilst you're doing it, time disappears? Great question, right?
Love that. I
And
love
she
that
said
question.
she had this young guy in her office one day. He was 27. He was never any good at school, so dropped out of school early and went and worked with his dad as an apprentice bricklayer. And he was working as a bricklayer. He's fully qualified. Everything was great until he hurt his back. And he hurt his back really badly and he could no longer work. So she asked him that question. And she said he was sitting there in this crumpled heap in the chair, head down. And she asked him that question. His head lifted up and he said, fishing. He said, really, do you like to fish? And he goes, oh, yeah, I love to fish. And she said, how often do you go fishing? And he said, well, every chance I get. And she said, really? And she started asking more questions. And she realized that this young guy knew everything there was needed to know about fishing. So she said, I'm going to get you a job. And there was a thing here in Australia where you could get an employer to employ somebody for 6 weeks and the government would pay their wage for them
Mm.
for the 6 weeks. So they
Wow, that's
get
great.
them a start, right? And so anyway, she rang this fishing tackle shop and she said, I've got a young fellow here. I want to put him on job start. I need to come and work for you. And I want you to employ him as a fishing consultant. And they said, but we don't have fishing consultants. And she said, well, you do now. So this young guy turns up to work and his job is to talk to the people who come in and ask them what they need and where they want to fish and what they want to do. And it's just this wealth of information, right? Well, after 7 days, the business rang her and said, we want to put him on full time. And within a year, their business had doubled.
I love that. And it's just
Right?
one question, isn't it? Just one, it's like one question. And it's
Yeah,
like one person like reflecting back at you, just taking the time to connect with that person and ask a question,
yeah,
and her being able to help him. I love that. I love that. But yeah, I mean, I do fear, I suppose, a little bit for the next generation, but like we just released a podcast last week, a podcast episode last week. It was all about Gen X, which is what we are, and obviously we called the Midlife Mentors, so it's what most of our listeners are. But and we were talking about all these different generational issues and things like that. And we were talking about how we paint this amazing utopia picture of the 90s and the early 2000s, but and looking back at the millennials and the Gen Zs and the Gen Alpha, which are now coming in, and us Gen Xers going, oh, our generation was the best. And we were laughing because we were thinking that's probably what the baby boomers said. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's moaning about our fashion and our music and all that kind of stuff, and we just realize how old we're getting as we sound like our parents.
Yeah.
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 but
It's so interesting.
but yeah, I do that conversation around women and being, it's a very loaded conversation. There's actually a woman through the post that we connected through. She's doing a lot on LinkedIn around this conversation. She helps women exit the C-suite top jobs and actually go, hang on a minute, this isn't what I wanted it to be. This is not what I expected it to be. I might not regret any of my decisions, but now I want something different. And so
Yeah.
it's about how helping women navigate that very much from a deep identity perspective, because we have been told we can have it all. We need the status, like somehow we've failed or something. If we want to take a step back, have a slower pace of life, drop a bit of our salary, not push ourselves to the extreme, and be okay with that, and not
Yeah.
have other women judging you, because actually it's not the men that we fear judgment from, it's the other women who are C-suite watching you go, hang on a minute, I don't want this for my life anymore. I want more time at home. I want a simpler life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so incredible. And that ability to actually decide, and there are men like that too, who are caught up in the corporate wheel,
Yeah.
and they're doing all this stuff and they're drinking too much, and
Mm-hmm.
and then of course the other one that I was fascinated by is that, different drugs mask different feelings, and alcohol masks fear, you know, smoking masks anger. But the one that really got to me was that cocaine masks shame and guilt. And so this thing of men in their 40s and in their 50s who
Mm.
are in these corporate roles telling lies, they're cutting across their own moral code on a daily basis just
Yeah.
to meet what they perceive to be the demands of their role. And
Yeah.
through this, and they're running self-criticism 15 to the dozen. And
Yeah.
so, because of all these things, they're degrading themselves so much, and they're so ashamed of themselves
Mm-hmm.
that they're turning to cocaine. And I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
use of cocaine, I I was naive as to how
Yeah.
extensive it is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, I know. And actually, here's the thing. I don't know, but I know we know that certain industries it's rife in. But actually, I think maybe I've got that mindset of back in the day, like thinking, oh, it's all financial services, it's the bankers, it's the law, it's so. But actually, I think it's more rife here than ever before. I know again in the young people, they're starting off on, we're getting into a drug conversation now, but I know that the ketamine is what worries me actually,
Mm.
because ketamine here is very cheap, cheaper than most alcoholic drinks. Our alcohol prices here are extortionate. So no one
Yeah,
can afford to drink alcohol when they're out. So they're buying bags of ketamine and doing ketamine. And then that obviously gets into cocaine when they can afford it, because cocaine's more expensive. And but what you've just said there really hits me. That's I can see, really, I will go away and do some research around that, because I'm a geek with stuff like this. So the fact that you've just said that those different emotions, I can see that. I can I
mm,
can I can see definitely how the cocaine masks the shame and the guilt of not being in alignment with your morality.
Well, yeah, it's like, I mean, there's a couple of things to join together here. I remember I used to do a lot of seminars for a big advertising agency here in Melbourne 25 years ago. And I loved going in there, and we covered a lot of topics. And I loved the way they would put free breakfast on for their people, so they get people into the office and really great
Yeah.
breakfast and floats and
Yeah.
stuff. And anyway, I was chatting to the young woman who'd booked me for the events one day, and I said, "How you doing?" She goes, "Oh, it's so busy. I've got to organise this Christmas party, and it's a really big thing." And I said, "Oh, what is my invitation still in the mail?" And she said, "This is a party you don't want to come to." And I said, "Oh, really? Why is that?" And she said, "Well, picture cereal bowls full of cocaine."
Yeah.
I said, "You're kidding. You're right. That's a party that I don't want to go to." And
Mm.
that never left me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I sort of, sometime later, I was watching Bill Hicks. Do you remember Bill Hicks, the great American comedian?
Yes.
Extraordinary. Like, he died at the age of 36. I mean, it was so funny. I was listening to Joe Rogan and Jimmy Carr
Yes.
talking just
Yeah.
yesterday, and they were talking about Bill Hicks. He was extraordinary, and he did this incredible routine where he talks about advertising and marketing people,
Mhm.
you know, and he
I'm
says,
ex-PR. I'm
right,
ex-PR in the like
yeah.
the late 90s, early 2000s. So what you've just said, I experienced. Yeah.
And it's like, and what I realized, and, because Bill Hicks said, people who live in advertising, work in advertising marketing, just kill yourselves. Just remove the world of your evil machinations. Just kill yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and I realized then I went back, and with all these pieces of data coming into place, the people who are in advertising, they're constantly lying. They're
Yes.
professional liars. You
Uh-huh.
know, they are putting stuff out there in the media about products that are just not true. And in fact, they are seducing people to use
Uh-huh.
products that they know are harmful. And of
John,
course they must live in
I
shame.
was in PR. I was in PR for 14 years. So
Right?
this has been my unraveling. I think that's why, even though I've been doing what I love for the last 12 years, we're getting deep here, but I love what I did. I love what I do. But it was, I look back now and I'm like, why did I have the burnout? What was unhealed? What was going on there? What was driving that behavior? This constant, and absolutely, I knew from day one when I worked in Harrods. So I was very fortunate at 19 to work in the best jobs in PR when I were, 2000, 1999, and it was amazing. But it was all, if I'm allowed, it was all bullshit, all utter bullshit. All I had to do all day, every day was put out bullshit and
Mm,
spin. That's what we were, spin doctors. You just
yeah,
spin a story. You're spinning a story. Your journalist that you're trying to send this spin story to knows that you're spinning it. It's embarrassing. It's humiliating. It's shameful because they know that you're bullshitting, but they also feel, because they're a journalist. So they're also spinning, they're using you, you're using them, and it's a very, very, I don't think I've ever had it been able to really target like you've just explained it to me. And I'm very, very grateful for that, because you've just opened up my the neurons in my brain to why I felt so uncomfortable for so long.
yeah,
Just this, yeah, there's a shame and there's a guilt because your moral compass, if you're a very moral person, which I always believe that I have been, you're working against that. And
yeah.
something's got to give.
Well, that's the thing. We do have a moral compass, and when we breach it, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to an event last night. Um, I'm involved with the school that I went to. I love that school very much. It's a Morris Grammar School, and there's an
How
old boys,
amazing.
yeah, and there's an old boys football club which I played at, and I was a
I love that.
successful athlete. And now, as this bunch of senior men, we've formed a coterie group lives outside the football club, but we're trying to rebuild the whole connection between the school and the football club because we're not getting the feed of players that we used to do. And we're sitting there last night, we're chatting about all these things, and one of the men at the table was a legendary player. He's older than me, and I just forgot about this last night, but he's had a lot of death in his family. His brother died, his wife died a couple of years ago, and he's got I think a partner now, but he's had all this incredible death around him. I think he lost his daughter.
Oh
And
my goodness.
anyway, it was just a really weird little thing where he had a bit of food on his lip, and and he was talking, one of the guys going, "Hey, mate, you got a bit of food on your lip, And he couldn't get rid of it. He tried everything but he kept missing it. And I said, his wife's not here to wipe his face. And I'd forgotten and nobody else really picked it up, but I haven't been able to let it go. I've got to call him today,
Bless
because
you. You're like me. You're like me.
I can't dismiss it. I've got to clean it
No.
up.
Yes.
You
Oh,
know what I
bless
mean?
you. I'm
But
I'm the
what's
same.
even But what's even more so than that, what I can feel underneath it, is that I heard just a few days before about his brother dying and like the sadness, and I thought to myself, I must reach out and check in with him, and I haven't done it.
Yeah.
So what happened last night,
There's
that's
a
where that comes from. But
yeah.
but we don't teach people these things, how to know what's going on inside themselves when they are going against their own moral compass you know
Yeah, until something breaks. But even when something breaks, like and the crazy the crazy thing is, like, I always want to be really, that's why I've talked about it. I want to be as open as I possibly can because I'm a stress management consultant. I've done all my own therapy. I am, I'm in this world, and there were unhealed parts of me that was driving certain behavior that I wasn't even really, maybe I was aware, but I was just like, keep on going, keep
yeah.
going for the success and the status and the growing and growing, never asking myself why, when I get to these enormous milestones, why aren't I able to celebrate them? Why aren't
Mm,
I able to be grateful? What is it in me that is still not, it's not enough, it's not enough.
yeah.
And to experience now, I took a step back, and I don't regret it. It's just been the most amazing, empowering thing just to take a step back, to put a pause on my programs, to put a pause on some of my coaching. This was like 2 years ago. I gave myself really about 6 months, and I was in a situation where I was able to do that, just to really sit and think. Because again,
Yeah.
we don't allow ourselves, we're constantly distracted. We don't even allow ourselves the space to be bored. I love that. Someone said that on one of our podcast. We don't, like before phones, we would stand in a queue at the supermarket and just sit there and stand there, wouldn't we? We'd just be like, oh, I'm standing in a queue. My thoughts, I'm bored. So my thoughts could start connecting things. But now we pick up our phone. We don't allow ourselves to make any connections in our own brain. And so we wonder why we're so disconnected from our ability to discern our own emotions and our own moral compass, because we're just constantly running from it.
Yeah. It's
Um,
yeah, it's really challenging. But but we can look at it and we can say it's challenging in a negative sort of way, or we can say, wow, what a great challenge.
yeah, yeah,
How do
yeah,
we move through this one? It's like when
yeah,
my wife and I went and did a detox in Thailand, and I did a 12.5 day fast, and she did
yes,
7.5 days. So she arrived there 5 days after I arrived. And when she checked in with the naturopath at the start and she was filling out the forms and doing all the evaluations, she just got this little bright idea and she pulled her computer and her phone out of her bag and slid it across the desk and said, "Can you put those in the safe, please?"
yeah, yeah,
And so she got me to message her family to just let them know that she was out of
yeah.
touch. And she spent 7 days.
It's beautiful.
Amazing.
Beautiful. Well, I did a self-imposed thing last August. It's around my birthday, and I was just being called. I was being called. I'm very spiritual, so I felt this real calling to detox from the noise, just the noise. So I took myself. There was a Christian retreat center in Devon, absolutely stunning. And I messaged them. I said, I don't need to talk to anyone, do I? They were like, no. I've got self-catering, so no one's going to speak to me about food. Yep, that's fine. And I literally, for 9 days, I had no mobile phone, no laptop. I didn't speak to anyone apart from one person to ask directions. And it was transformative. But people are like, what, that's crazy, Claire. Like, how could you spend that much time with yourself? And I was like, it was amazing. It was just what a challenge to see who we are without all the noise.
Great
It's just,
advice, really.
it's
Yeah.
just like this. And I would challenge any of your listeners, like I mean, it's a great, it's almost like we're too afraid. So I know so many people that are like, I could never do that. I'm like, well, you could. Of course you could do it. You're
Mm,
choosing not to do it. Of course you could do it, but it's so alien for you to sit with yourself without going on your mobile phone or being constantly activated. You're frightened about what's going to come up, but
mm.
it's more frightening not to know who you are.
So true. Well, I want to, I mean, we've been going for a while now, but I
Yes.
want to ask a question that I think you'd be able to shed a lot of light on. So we know about women going through menopause, and I've experienced it being a partner in a situation where my partner was going through
Mm,
menopause, and it was challenging, and
mm,
mood changes, all sorts of stuff changing, and it can be really erratic, and you can't plan for anything because you're not sure how things are going to be. And so strategies for men who are in that experience, because a lot of marriages fall apart when women
oh my
go through
goodness,
menopause. Yeah.
massively. Yeah, I talk about this
But
all the time.
then there's like putting some attention on andropause as well, and what's happening with men with reducing testosterone. It's like that one is like a really messy soup that society's sort of going, oh no, we don't want to look at that one,
Mm,
but there's
mm.
carnage happening, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
and young people who might be in their 20s are watching their parents go through this and they don't know what to do, you know.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
really interested in your broad perspective
yeah,
on all of that.
yeah, yeah. It's something I love to talk about as well. So again, I feel very grateful and very blessed that James is interested in all of this as well, because we can go into organizations and speak about the menopause and the andropause, but then it's not just about it, because even in the workplace, the people are people. The people have personal lives, and it's actually we're able to go into organizations and touch people's lives in the organization so they can go home and make a difference in their relationships. We get so many men and women coming up afterwards going, oh my goodness, this has helped me really understand what's going on for my partner and have some more compassion. And first of all, I've just got something to say about going into organizations and just having me as a woman go in and talking about menopause, I find isn't as powerful as actually James coming along. It's very, very powerful. If you've got a group of men and women, actually, they don't necessarily want to hear just my opinion and me bleating on about the menopause because I'm a woman, but actually having a man in that environment is incredibly powerful. And
Yeah.
I've noticed the energy of the room. It's like, oh, I can breathe. There's a man talking about menopause. It's okay to talk about menopause. It might be okay for me to answer a question or ask a question. But it is an absolute minefield at midlife. We've got all of these pressures going on, all of these pressures. We're called generation squeeze because we've got aging parents, we've got my young children, we've got financial pressures, we're still climbing the career ladder, we might be worrying about our health, all of this stuff. And then you add in hormones. And we call it the second adolescence. Because you remember what happened when we were teenagers and we were going through those hormonal changes. It's exactly the same. It's confusing, it's isolating, you don't know what's going on. You feel like you're going a bit mad. Same thing's happening. And if you don't know, first of all, if you've not educated yourself, man and woman, about what's going on for the other one, it's going to be very hard to communicate. It's going to be very hard to connect. So I would say what we really encourage is both partners to go off and be open. Hopefully, fingers crossed, you're open to being curious about what, because curiosity is the key. We project when we've been in our relationships for a long time, we project, we presume, and by the time we've reached midlife and we're going through all these hormonal changes, we've both changed enormously. We're different people. So stop assuming, stop presuming, and be curious about what's going on for that other person. And, spend some time communicating. It only needs to be like 5 minutes, just something small, even just being like intimate by holding a hand, because we know libido is going to be all over the place for men and women. So intimacy isn't just about having sex, it's about actually discovering new ways of being intimate with each other. So try and be emotionally intimate with each other, be curious, ask that person what's important to them. Hey, you're a new person. What's important to you right now? What's going on for you? Like, where do you see yourself in a couple of years' time? What are you most afraid of right now? What's the biggest challenge for you? And the thing that we mostly don't do is we listen, but we don't hear.
Yeah.
Sorry, we hear, but we don't listen. So we're hearing, but we don't listen. Don't interrupt the person, let them flow, let them talk. And we just, I want to bring, James and I want to bring awareness. I champion what James is doing so passionately, almost more passionately than I do menopause, because I want men to know that they are seen, that they are heard, that they are important, that they're not making it up, that how they're feeling is valid and it's hormonal, and that they should be listened to, and that there are things that we can all do together instead of breaking apart. There are things that it's an opportunity. It's such a beautiful opportunity to rediscover each other. If we see it as like you said, if we see it as a massive challenge that it's insurmountable and we're never going to get over, guess what's going to happen? But we can really take it as an opportunity to rediscover each other.
That's such a beautiful perspective. Yeah, because it's like, there's so many other things that people go through where they're just forced to support each other. Somebody has a bad accident, they become a paraplegic, quadriplegic,
Yeah.
and they somehow get through their own resistance and their own mindset to then find a way to be really connected and very supportive and build a new foundation for a relationship.
Yeah.
But because I feel like there's no physical signs, and like, for example, when my ex-partner was feeling really overwhelmed and really frustrated, and she might say something nasty to me, like for me to understand that's not personal. That's just what's going
Yeah.
on for her at the moment. And so learning and talking and seeking to understand what's going on so that I can get a better idea of
Yeah.
how to be in those situations then allows that situation to move through whatever it needs to move through for however long it takes. But
Yeah.
the problem is if I push back and take it personally and get angry, and then it ends up being a fist fight, and then this resentment that's
Yeah.
laid over the top of all the other stuff, and it
Yep.
just
Yep.
compounds, and it all happens because there's a lack of understanding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
I
cool.
suppose if James and I, like, oh my goodness, we are not perfect. Like, again, we talk about the fact that we've been to marriage counselling. Like James and I have been together 9 years, so not long, but we went straight into working, getting into a relationship and working together straight away,
Yep.
which is big. And there was no honeymoon periods. Like, we loved each other so much. We've both been divorced, like never thought we were going to be able to find each other. It was amazing, but we were straight into a stressful working relationship. And there was, you think that you've dealt with your baggage from the last one and the last one, but you haven't. You've dealt with that baggage on your own. Then when you get into a relationship again, that person is always going to trigger the unhealed parts of you. That's what relationships are for. We want to run and hide from that. But it's if we can again see that as a beautiful opportunity to look at ourselves, to become more of who we really are, like more peaceful, more
Mm,
self-loving, because it's not them and you, it's such an opportunity when we're with a person in a relationship to learn about ourselves. And even me saying that, I'm like, who is that woman? Because I didn't have this perspective until a few years ago. I had a lot of resentment towards James. There was a lot of stuff. We went through a lot of trauma in our relationship, outside and in our relationship, that there was a lot of stuff that was unhealed, unspoken, uncommunicated. And we've been through this journey together. And I'm so grateful that I've had him to reflect back at me what I've needed to learn about myself. I'm so grateful. I love myself more because of those bits that he rattled inside of me. And we went to marriage counselling. That was amazing. We were very good. It was very good that we had an incredible therapist. But what I would say is both parties need to be willing. I hear this a lot. My partner won't go. And I'm like, well, make sure that you're coming from as much of a balanced, non-projecting place as you possibly can, with a lot of self-awareness. And if they're still not willing to grow with you and to be curious, then unfortunately it might be a case where you have to move on and
yeah.
and do that work on your own.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? It's like, and sometimes that's what it takes when one partner feels like they're moving away, that then the other partner will move
Yeah,
forward, But trying to remove the battleground. And
yeah.
I think that there's a beautiful word that one of my great mentors, a woman, gave to me. She said, John, you've got to feel the togetherness in this,
Mm.
and if we can help people
Yes.
bring back the togetherness of it,
Yeah.
it's like this is a challenge. This is not a challenge that you're going through. This is a
Yeah.
challenge that we're going through,
Mm. hmm Mm.
So interesting. It's like, it's really cool because you gave me some really cool insights there. It's an
Good.
amazing area. So I've got to plug you into some people in other places in the world because they'll be very
I'd love
interested
that.
in the work that you guys are doing.
Mm,
And
thank
I'd
you.
love to have a
I'd
conversation
love
with
that.
James too, That'd be really,
Mm.
really, really cool. Well,
He would
we've
love
been
to have a
going,
conversation with you. I know, but look at that. It's getting
yeah,
dark
incredible.
here. It's getting dark here in London.
Well, it's getting light here in Melbourne, so how's
Yes,
that?
bless
So
you. Bless you.
yeah, so look, so wonderful, Claire. Thank you so much.
Oh.
Before we finish, it's like I want to ask you, when you were growing up, who was a man that you knew in your life that you looked at and you thought, wow, that's the
Mm.
model of who I think a man should be. Something,
Oh, it's a really good question, and my answer is going to probably shock you. I didn't have one. I
really.
didn't have one. I didn't have one at all. I love my dad dearly, but it wasn't him. Unfortunately, it would be the man I knew in my life. I'll try not to get too emotional about this. It would be the man that I knew up until I was 11, which was my grandpa. And then sadly he passed away when I was 11. And he is still, even though he's not been here for a majority of my life, he's still my inspiration, if that makes sense. He's still present. Everything he taught me and everything he instilled in me is still there. So I would say I look up to him, even though he left me when I was 11.
That's pretty
Yeah,
must have been. What was his
yeah.
name?
Sydney, Sid,
Sydney. Well,
Sydney. Yeah,
so interesting
Sydney.
that you nearly ended up living in Sydney.
Yeah, yeah, he was a beautiful, beautiful man. Like, I'll just very quickly, the reason he was in the Second World War. Just an incredible man. He was shot. He was a painter. He was shot in the right arm, so he couldn't use that. And then he crawled to a house, and this sounds really rude and racist. Big German opened the door, and he was like, "Oh no, it's all over for me." But this German was very, very kind and set his arm. So he was able to keep the arm. It wasn't amputated or anything. And then he taught himself to paint with his left hand, had lots of exhibitions, incredible. This is resilience. He taught himself to do painting with his left, and then he had a stroke down his left side, all of his left side. So then he had to teach himself again to paint with his right hand and his right arm, which was set. So he could never move his right arm. And then he painted again. And he was just this, and he taught me how to paint and my love for art. And I just always remember him saying, there is no such word as can't. There is no such word as can't. And because of what he'd been through, I was like, no, you're right. You're a dude. You are
Yeah,
a resilient dude. Like, amazing. Yeah.
that's well, thank you for sharing that. That's a really lovely way to end this
Yes, in
conversation.
honor of my grandpa.
Well, Claire Davis, thank you so much for
Oh,
creating this
thank you,
time. I
John.
know the time zones are really difficult between
Yeah,
Australia and England.
it's been
We made it
beautiful. That's
work.
good.
So
Yes.
really grateful, and thank you so much. And thank you everybody for tuning in. And don't forget to click on the subscribe button at the bottom of this podcast so you get to hear of the next episodes that are coming out. And please remember, when you're out there in the world, be that adult that you needed when you were a little kid and you were in trouble or you were afraid. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. And thank you, Claire.
Thank you so much.